Hi everyone, Clayton Hester here for another episode of the Playback. Actually, it's a special episode of the Playback. Um, I've been trying to step back more from the Playback as far as letting our next generation of Redhawk Radio Theater do more with it and take it over. But I'm back as my tenure as the fearless leader of Redhawk Radio Theater, I guess. Um, it comes to a close in the next couple months. I'm back with this special episode where we're going to talk about the composition side of audio drama, that is, music composition, with Red Hawk Radio Theater's composer, one of our composers, but who has served as the primary source for so much of the musical scoring for our episodes. And so we're going to talk with Rachel Harness today in this special episode where we carry a conversation of the Red Hawk Radio Theater after show as we cast the light upon music in audio dramas. Hope you really enjoy this one.
Many people think that the best way to escape war.
This is The Playback from Arrow Podcast Network and Red Hawk Radio Theater. Welcome everybody to another episode of the After Show, and this is a special edition. With RRT, there are just so many folks involved that it's not every day that everybody gets their time for the spotlight. But I really like the chance to bring people into the conversation that, you know, may not be like at the recording when we usually would record the after show after a show. But we are here with the person behind the so much of the music of RRT for the 2020 to 2021 school year, and we are here today with Rachel Harness. Hi Rachel, how's it going?
Hi Clayton, doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. And so we're just going to talk today, and I wanted to ask a few questions about kind of your process composing with RRT, and just out of curiosity, like, what would you, as far as like, musical influences, what would you say are some of yours? Who do you consider to be, some of the folks that have impacted I guess whether it's your approach to composition or just your musical tastes?
Well, I'm really into like modern wind band music in general, and probably my favorite living composer is Oscar Navarro. He's a Spanish composer who has also done music for film. We've played one of his pieces before in Wind Symphony on campus, and I just fell in love with him. His pieces are so programmatic. Like he's got this piece called Libertadores, which is about like I don't remember the exact story, but like it kind of takes place, you could say, in like a jungle. It's supposed to evoke like a rainforest, and you can hear it. Like you can hear in the music like the rain and the birds chirping and the leaves rustling. And he doesn't even use like extended techniques like whistles or like actual like it's just music, but it works so well, and you can like hear a setting. So that's one of my big influences, and that's the effect that I try to create a lot of times in my music. That's kind of what I'm after. That's the goal.
That's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. With all of the different things that you've done, we can just we'll list off. So you've been involved with you did Starship Rim for us. You did Pericles Pinchworth, and you did Bigfoot as well, or as we like to abbreviate it, but the Cryptid Tapes Bigfoot, that one. And so, And so how, with your experience composing for audio drama and then listening back, what do you think is kind of the relationship between, what you've kind of worked on in relationship to kind of like, well, the obvious like cinematicness of the composition, what do you think is the kind of relationship between audio drama or composing for that and just the general soundtrack kind of sound, I guess, if I could say it that way, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, composing for any kind of like drama, whether it's an audio drama or a movie or TV or whatever, like, the music is there. The music is always there to kind of like, I feel like it's there to give life to what's going on, like, um, to kind of bring out the emotions of what's happening or the action or the drama or whatever's happening. Like, I feel like whatever is going on in your head when you're watching or maybe acting out the drama is what should be happening in the music. And I think that's common for like any kind of soundtrack. The music is there to just kind of provide an artistic or creative extension of what's already happening in the actor's mind, the writer's mind, the listener's or viewer's mind.
Mm-hmm. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so for Pericles Penceworth, as it continues to, as we record this, it's continuing to come out. I really feel, and I was telling this to Elle the other day, but our vice president, but it's just like the music of that, what you've done for that one. I really feel if we had the audience to receive it, it really has that. I feel like it has iconic potential. Honestly, it has such a uniqueness and flavor to it that it's kind of like like everybody knows the theme for like the X-Files, everybody knows the theme, like just with that kind of like distinctiveness. It's really interesting to me, and I just like to re-listen to it, and it's like, wow, that's that's good stuff. But yeah, no,
Well, that makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside.
yeah, no, as far as kind of building to up the kind of like dynamics of the show, what sort of things inspire you as far as like just putting together a piece for a show?
Well, for me, a really big necessity most of the time is actually reading the script. And, I always ask you for a script or a script before I start writing anything, because a big part of the process for me is just reading it and trying to get into that headspace, and like getting a feel for what the script is all about. And then usually as I'm reading, I'll like start to hear the music in my head and like, oh, this is the kind of tone that I think should go here. And I'll be marking in the script, like I want this here and this here and this here. And, being the busy college students we are, it doesn't always make it into the final soundtrack because I just don't have time for it. But I try to get those real essential core elements of the script and put it into the music. And sometimes, just thinking about things, a big part of my creative process is just kind of like waiting for a bolt of inspiration, I guess you could say. I'll just be reading it or maybe even not thinking about it, and I'll just hear the melody in my head. And it comes like, the melody comes almost like fully formed, and then that's my starting point. And I kind of build around that. So that's kind of how like the creative process starts for me.
Yeah. No, that's interesting that you because it seems like a conversation I have a lot with folks is just kind of like the role of influence in what they're doing, and like how that materializes, or kind of the the idea of like quote unquote stealing from like other people in the regards that
Yeah.
art is always influencing art, not to not to say anybody is doing anything unethical, but that people overstate that's what they do. And so the idea of like influencing, how much do you think that like is true, and do you like do you kind of look at all for like this a certain artist's ideas or a certain artists like work and be like, hey, maybe that kind of sound is something we need to bundle into here? Do you like look for like the components that are typical in the genre, something like that?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and I'm a music major, so I'm constantly playing and listening to music just as like part of my coursework. And there will be times, I'll hear something in a piece that we're playing. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I need to use that somewhere else because it is honestly one of my biggest fears is accidentally plagiarizing an entire piece. Just because how sometimes you get like a melody stuck in your head and you're like,
Yeah.
what is that? I don't know what that is. My biggest fear is that that'll happen to me one day and I'll mistake it for like, I just came up with
Yeah.
that. But no, you definitely draw influence from all sorts of places and things that you've heard, and going into writing a soundtrack for any of the audio dramas. Sometimes it'll be for a piece that I have like lots of experience in that type of music, so I don't even need to listen to anything. It's all already in my head. Sometimes, like for Starshire Rim, I'm not like a big old Western type person.
Yeah.
So when I started on that, you were sending me all these different examples and things
Yeah.
to listen to. And I relied really heavily on that. And I was just like listening to these playlists and thinking like, oh, I've heard like this same instrument or this same rhythmic pattern in like the past 5 songs that I've listened to. I should probably include that in the score. And, it's just a matter of being able to pick out, it's a matter of being able to listen to a piece and sort between what is characteristic of the style and what is characteristic of the specific piece itself. Listening and finding out what makes a song the same as all the other songs in its genre and what makes it unique. And then taking those elements and reorganizing them, reusing them, recycling them, and kind of like building something new. So there's definitely a lot of influence happening and stealing from other pieces. That's nothing new. That's just how music has always worked.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about it is like when I was younger, I watched a lot of westerns in my day, and until like recently, past couple of years, and as I was writing Starshire Rim, like I began to understand one of the things that I really loved about the western was like kind of that triumphal sound, kind of that pre Morricone spaghetti western innovation, just that kind of
Mhm.
sound. And so like when I was working with you in terms of just like the direction of the music for that one, it was kind of like realizing like most of the western sound is just kind of like the it is all descended from it's the big family of Copeland over there in terms of just like
Yeah.
what all is descended from it.
Hmm.
And then because I was just so interested in the connections like between just the orchestral way in which much of like the sci-fi of 20th century has also been highly orchestral, really instrumental,
Hmm.
or at least non-electronic instruments, less than like the uh I guess maybe the example that pops to mind is like the Doctor Who sound, and more like um,
Yeah.
the broad Star Trek intros, or the Star Wars, of course. And so it's kind of like there were a couple like the grandfather of each sound that I was looking to, uh, kind of supply as an influence for that. Whereas like you've got Gustav Holst's kids over here, and Copeland over there. So that was just an interesting thing for me, as I am not a barely musical literate, maybe more so than when I first started talking to you about all the
Yeah.
compositional stuff, and as I kind of try to work on learning a bit more these days. It's interesting because I was reading yeah, I do in fact own the book on songwriting for dummies. That's a a volume I have. But one of the things in there is that Mel Brooks, always having these great musical numbers, and a lot of his works just like come out of nowhere, and he would, because he didn't know music either, he would just like hum into